Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Boundaryless Conversations podcast. My name is Stina Heikkilä. I'm co-host of the podcast together with Simone and Cicero.
Ciao, hello, everybody.
This is a special epilogue of season 4, and we are here today basically to wrap up season 4 and to reflect a little bit on what we have learned this season and to look ahead on what's next for the research in Boundaryless. So this is a special moment for me as well, because I'm not going to co-host the next season of the podcast. So I'm sure that I will be back in some way to the podcast in the future, because this is a really privileged space to be able to talk to such amazing guests and explore really exciting topics. But a heads up to the listeners that I will not be here for the next season, sadly. So I'm happy to be here though this evening and to chat with you, Simone, about what's in the pipeline and what listeners should check out during the summer break.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm sorry for the listeners that we're starting from this big bummer of you not being with us next season, but I'm sure I'm going to be, convincing you to join some special episodes. In the meantime, instead, you won't get rid of me as easy as with Stina, because I'm going to stick with you next year and with some news and different co-hosts probably. So we're working on the concept and design of the next season these very days. And part of this work is also to sketch out what we can call a research compass. You can follow this episode more easily if you want by going to our blog and check for a blog post that mentions research compass, and you will also find the link in the show notes. So let's keep it in mind. These are a bit like the research questions that we have at Boundaryless. More generally, everybody knows, of the listeners hopefully knows, that Boundaryless is the company that produced this podcast, and the mission of Boundaryless is to reduce the barriers to the future of organizing. That's how we say. And part of this work is really about exploring emerging patterns and envisioning how things can shift in the short and long term. So certainly, while compiling this list of research questions, we have been looking into the past year, more or less. That has been a year of research and working with customers, working with adopters of our open source models. I would say in general, what we see is that there are some changes and trends that are kind of pushing the system, and the system is shifting to what we call building ecosystemically. So let's get there. Let's start first from the kind of drivers that we see. And certainly one of the key drivers of change that we have been interested about this year has been that the kind of very scenic debut of AI and LLMs on the scene of strategy. I think we spent the last 6-8 months wondering about how much AI has shown in terms of impacts, potential impacts, in terms of capabilities, in terms of massive changes that can bring to the landscape. And I think one of the most interesting angles we have been looking into AI has been that of correlating this with the background transformation in general, the background trends that we see in the market around modularity and composability in services and software. And I think the impact that we are starting to foresee is how AI can really be the glue that keeps together a future of services and products, which is much more personalized, much more in the hands of the users, much more plural, much more diverse. So if I look at the future of the internet after the advent of LLMs and these powerful AIs, it's a much more personalized, much more an internet made of services that users can shape on their own needs.
Yeah, and I think what you have captured in this reflection is really like, again, making these tools more, let's say, accessible. They are becoming more and more accessible to everyone to use. So it's opening up that new interface to users, to customers, to actually be involved probably in new ways in shaping products and so on, if this is what you meant by that. And I think if I look back on those episodes where we talked about the tech trends and AI specifically, we had this episode from Mark van Rinneman, who was talking about looking beyond the hype of a specific tool or something like that and really trying to look at the long-term trend and look what is happening in the longer term future and not sort of give up on just because one bust, let's say, in the market with one specific tool is distracting us from what is going on underneath, kind of thing.
I think the interesting thing for me was that all this conversation really kind of connected very easily with previous conversations that we had with some of our customers and many of our adopters around really transforming their organizations in a way that is much more network-centric, much more unbundled in pieces. And looks like, AI is just one of the manifestations of these technological advancements that are really empowering small teams. And this was also the year, for example, that we have been witnessing Elon Musk taking over Twitter and, kind of getting rid of lots of the employees there. And there is a lot of debate in general around, this huge potential that small teams are starting to have. And what does it mean in terms of the impacts that this can have on our organizations. And I think we discussed this with, for example, with Casey Winters when we spoke about how organizations are becoming increasingly product-centric and taking the shape of the product. We discussed this with Joe Justice, talking about how, for example, Tesla embraces this modular approach. We had countless episodes that are kind of pointing out that the future of organizing is much more granular, much more unit-based, much more team-based. This is an exciting evolution because my impression is that in this transition, we're going to make space for teams to do what they want, what they feel is important, and it's kind of hinting towards finally getting rid of industrialism and opening the space for a really new approach to organizing.
Yeah, and I think that also thinking back to another episode with Thomas Davenport and Lax Srinivasan on the idea that AI would not replace entire jobs in many cases, at least, what the prediction is now, but more tasks. So part of a job. So it's even more, like you were mentioning, the unbundling of a job into tasks and some of which would be sort of replaced by machines and some would be still, let's say, controlled or intervened on by humans. It's kind of being able to put apart and then put together an execution mode in different ways.
It also connects a lot with so many great, I would say, fascinations and ideas that we are getting from the world of Web3. As our listeners know that, blockchain-enabled organizing, smart contracts, Web3, all these topics have been very central to the conversations we had on the podcast this year, but also in the past years. We spoke about Deschi, for example, with Jocelyn Pearl. We spoke about large-scale kind of cybernetic implementations of complex organizing with Michael Zargam. In one of the last episodes, we spoke with Justice Conder about how smart contracts can be kind of a continuation of the automation wave that you have been talking about, powered by AI, but not only, but also powered by more traditional DevOps practices, for example. And so we can really look into, I would say, a future of organizing where we have this kind of bifurcation. And I'm gonna, pick on one of the key ideas shared, I think, this year on the podcast, which is the idea of trustware versus socialware that Chase Chapman brought in the very first episode, when essentially she helped us to understand that with the advent of these new technologies that allow us to create these complete contracts, so these clearly defined rules that can self-execute. We can basically now have a discussion about how we relate to each other, how we engage in the social aspect of work and producing value and interacting. But we can do it based on a very strong foundation of participatory governed infrastructures and shared spaces of production of value and work. Let's call it organizations. I don't know if this is the right noun to use, because we're talking about something different that is emerging and something that is really connecting our teams and us as individuals at much broader, much more diverse and much new, I would say, new ways that who knows what kind of changes can bring. I'm thinking of how, for example, when we spoke with Geoff Morgan or Nafeez Ahmed, we have been talking about, future of organizing as a much more diverse thing. So as something we have to invent, not just something we have to just replicate, old patterns about. So yeah, that makes me hopeful at the end of the day.
In this very last episode that is released at the same time as this epilogue with our co-thinkers, Lisa and Bill, recurring co-thinkers, I would say, I had a feeling that we were talking again about this no more and not yet, that a concept or like a framework that we were already talking about in 2020 when we were releasing the white paper. And the feeling is still a little bit that the scaffolding to build the bridge between the no more and the not yet is not yet there. But it seems from these discussions that we have had with different players on Web3 and decentralized autonomous organizations and so on, it's quite a diverse field of actors, quite a diverse ecosystem, but everyone more or less is building some kind of scaffolding forward to be able to get to that new way of organizing, like you were mentioning. It's a question of patience, or I don't know, it's kind of, do we even need to accelerate, or should it be a moment where those experimentations are taking place and what's the next step? What is the question you have there for understanding better that bridge building, if you see what I mean?
Well, that's a big question, actually, but we have lots of questions. The listeners that are listening to the podcast now can head to our blog and find our blog post where we have been talking about this research compass and explore a bit what we're talking about. But certainly, I mean, probably if I have to answer to your question, I really see that the gap is going to be bridged by our audacity to experiment. I see a lot of convergence now. So pieces are coming together, basically. For example, if you think about AI enabling, modular products to connect, and then, modular products means, let's extend modularity beyond the organization. So it starts to sound like, let's make Web3 protocols. And then, suddenly you think about, okay, we're building things differently. We need different organizing methods to run them. And then you think about nodes, and you think about teams, and you think about, self autonomy in defining what work is important for us. And then you suddenly think about, okay, we need to create new organizations, new institutions to make this work, and so on. So everything sounds like it's connected. The background is coming to the foreground so vehemently. And so what I feel is it's really up to us now to dare to imagine products beyond products, organizations beyond organizations, collaborations beyond collaborations.
Yeah, and I think as we were talking with Christian Bason from the Danish Design Center about the idea of design thinking, but focusing on the thinking. I mean, it's not a question of focusing only on thinking. We are definitely there's a lot of focus on doing, right? Like you said, experimentation and so on. But the idea of questioning how we design is probably really surfacing at the moment because, like you said, it's there will be new ways of designing. We have to kind of throw out the assumptions. in the window somehow.
Probably the actual role of design and design itself looks lost to me in the last few years. I know that there's plenty of design leaders coming up and basically writing books or talking about how much how innovation is needed in design to make it work again, let's say, in this kind of crazy world and chaotic world we're living. But anyways, let's not go too long, because we can stay here talking about these things forever. I just want to mention that Boundaryless will continue to research. We will continue to provide both very actionable tools, very practical tools you can use to design your strategies. If you look to our blog, for example, this year we've been publishing a few blog posts talking about techniques and talking about macro problems of platform design. So if you're a platform designer, if you're launching a marketplace, a product, if you're thinking about getting to the market with a new platform proposition, really don't forget to look into our tools. And possibly if you like, you can also ask for help. We provide help to those that ask for it. At the same time, we also dare to, I would say, push our research to integrate the massive innovations that are needed, and that also brands, for example, or public institutions or organizations that normally work with us really cannot avoid to adopt or to at least to test and experiment with, because otherwise the risk is really to become irrelevant in a world that is changing so fast.
Yeah, that's very clear.
One thing I want to ask you before moving on: one episode in the long list of episodes we have been recording, I think we are approaching 80 or something like that, maybe more if I'm not wrong, like 90. What's your best episode that you want to suggest to our listeners? I know that there are so many, but take 5 seconds, just pick one episode and suggest this to everybody to just go and catch up.
Oh no. I think I have to take 2. Because one that was really on one of my favorites this season was with the Christian Bason from the Danish Design Center. The other one is Barry O'Reilly on the residuality theory. This was extreme stretch for me to cognitively grasp what he was talking about, but with those little breadcrumbs that I could fit into my understanding, this was really something that really stretched my mind.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you so much for this season, for all the 4 seasons. And I'm sure that this is not a goodbye in any case. So from the podcast, because it's a very enjoyable space to be in, very privileged space to be in and talk to all these amazing guests. Would like to wish you and all the listeners a great summer break, if that's the part of the world where you are in, and so on. And to catch up later.
Stina, it was a pleasure to have you co-host this for more than 80, almost 90, maybe more, I don't remember, episodes. And I'm really looking forward to have you back at some point when you will miss the Boundaryless Conversations podcast too much, or maybe for some special guest or special co-host episode. So I'm counting on this. Are you in for that?
Yeah, it would be a great pleasure, of course.
And to our listeners, really, thank you so much for your time listening to this. If you have speaker suggestions, if you want to sponsor the podcast, if you want to collaborate in any ways, we're probably going to open up these opportunities for next season. So reach out, and in the meantime, go back to the archive, check all the amazing episodes we have been publishing this year and the year before, and since we started in 2020, and I'm really looking forward to catch up around the end of the summer with season 5. It will probably have more thematic verticals, and will be probably a little bit more easy to understand what are our research questions, starting from this compass. And in the meantime, as always, remember to think boundaryless.